What's the price of popularity? According to the New York Times, it goes for pennies on social media. The Times recently found that a range of celebrities bought Twitter followers to boost their profiles. But the seemingly seedy practice also included some prominent journalists. Adam has more.
Chicago Sun-Times columnist and movie critic Richard Roeper has become a household name, starting with his days as Roger Ebert's sidekick. And his reach on Twitter seems equally broad. He has over 200,000 followers. But not so fast. A New York Times expose names Roeper as among dozens of celebrities who bought followers through a company called Devumi.
The company providing its clients with more than 200 million Twitter followers, but the Times says it found that 3.5 million of those are fake accounts.
The Times says Devumi's other media clients include former ESPN reporter Britt McHenry and Fox Business Network's Elizabeth McDonald. But the idea that Roeper bought followers hasn't sat well inside the Chicago Sun-Times, which says we will not be publishing any reviews or columns by Rich until an investigation is complete. And Devumi itself may be in hot water.
According to the New York Times, Devumi stole the names, photos, and hometowns of real social media users to make at least 55,000 bot accounts look authentic.
New York's Attorney General says he's now investigating the company. In all, it's a good reminder of this classic take. On the internet, no one knows you're a dog.
I found this astonishing. First of all, what are you, 1-800-BUY-ME-TWITTER name? I mean, how do you even, what are you thinking? And I know there are people who are obsessed with how many followers they have and all that kind of thing, but to me, it's journalism 101. It would seem to me that's a false profile. If you're saying that you have 200 so odd followers and you bought them, then I agree with the Chicago Sun-Times.
Well, you know, it's been known for a number of years that a lot of those Twitter follower statistics are bogus. I have long assumed that many of the people who follow me on Twitter are bogus accounts. But I don't know that the phenomenon was that widely understood. I'd be curious to know whether Richard Roeper thought that he was buying actual Twitter followers.
Probably.
He may have. I think that this may have been an overreaction on the Chicago Sun-Times' part, but it shows once again what a swamp Twitter has become. And Twitter has very little incentive to do anything about this because the more people with accounts, the bigger they look, the more interactions there are, and they look more viable as a result. So the incentives are all wrong.
No, not a swamp, Dan. What have I always said the internet is? Sewer. Thank you very much. And, you know, I figured out early on that Twitter followers were a joke when I started getting followed by donut shops in Iowa. You know, come on.
Yeah.
They're not interested in what I have to say.
What's wrong with donuts?
Nothing, although they're not on my diet lately. But
that was my handle. It must have been me.
What I'd like to know is, was the Chicago Sun-Times or the organizations that employed these other voracious purchasers of Twitter followers putting pressure on the talent? Were you being judged by the number of followers? If so, that speaks to the to say the least, skewed judgment and priorities of the bosses.
Well, it speaks to the power of measurement. Things are measurable now in a way that they weren't before. You can measure how many Twitter followers, how many retweets, how many people reacted to your tweet, in the same way that you can measure how many comments your article drew or how many page views your article drew. So all of a sudden there's a way to quantify your influence that wasn't there before, and you can see where the pressure would come from above and maybe from within for some journalists. You know, I agree, it's the wrong thing to do, but you see where all of a sudden you can judge yourself and against everybody else.
I'm glad we have the Nielsen ratings, because at least there's a measurement.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's for real.
Well, everybody goes by it, though.
Look, I don't think there's much of a controversy here. I think it's for bragging rights. Should you try to get real followers out there? And shouldn't be? Yeah, I think sort of a practice should be that you should try to have real followers. But there's not a real problem here unless you're trying to accumulate a large following for the purpose of being an influencer where you can then charge people. And I know journalists don't do that, but there are some media types out there who get the following and then they're getting paid in order to be influencers for a product. Then you're lying and creating something where someone's paying you for it and there's no real result that will come from it because it's all fake. That's a real problem with that. But I think in general, I mean, what are followers anyway? What does that really mean? It's a number.
How many do you have?
Well, last check, it was about 8,475, but far less than Dan has over here.
8,000 of them were donut shops in Iowa.
That's right, absolutely.